Oh, don't make a career like mine. Make your own career, please. So that I will start. Like everyone has different paths and different journeys. MBA more than a degree is a network, and
Mm,
that network unlocks opportunities for you. So if you have done an MBA from a tier one in India, your network is going to be primarily in India.
yeah.
Versus if you do it in the UK. Having said that, I don't think MBA or higher education is the only way to move abroad. Like I am the personal example of that. So I don't think people should be restricted in thinking that this is their only way. It is one of the easiest ways, yes, because in the larger scheme of things, you get an admission and you move, and then you have eligibility. You have kind of one blocker of not being in the location is already kind of removed. Marketers are often looked at people who will understand the competitive landscape, who will understand what's the next new thing, where are customers kind of moving, progressing.
Hello, today we have with us a very special guest who is here for this video all the way from London, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So her name is Aashima Praveen, and she's currently the Associate Director of Growth Product Marketing at Bumble. And she will be taking us through her journey. So that's what we're here for today. So, hi, Aashima. And
Hi.
I'd like to begin with something. This is a question that has been in my mind. So you did a bachelor's in BBA from Flame University, right?
Mhm.
So how did you go from there to like directly to senior roles?
I did not go to senior roles from there. I went first to an entry level. I was a marketing associate at Groupon, it's a Groupon nearby.
Yeah.
So I started straight from entry level roles. There was no senior, like I learned like the ropes of marketing, just like that was my first gig. That's where I
Hmm.
learned everything. I was in a brand marketing role at that time, so brand marketing, social media. I used to like design social media posts on
Okay.
Canva, so it was like a very entry level role. But I think the good part was that I had a really good manager and I had mentors in that company that allowed me to take on more than just like operational or execution delivery projects. And I was able to kind of learn a lot more about just marketing and brand and different types of areas within marketing, because obviously it was more of a startup environment and I had the
Hmm.
opportunity to be a part of different things. So yeah, but my the first job from my undergrad was an entry level
And
marketing
then
role.
you're lovely, but like then you progressed really, really quickly. And a lot of people tend to go for like a higher education degree before they move on. So how did
Yeah.
you make that jump?
So, all right. So it's not like I did not have a plan to have, like, I wanted to get a higher education degree, but I think I did not want to do it in India because
Hmm.
India has a very standard rut of like, go whatever, go to IIMs and all of that. And people without experience end up in those schools, which I did not want to do. I wanted to build a career in marketing, and I knew marketing was more of experience led area. So
Yeah.
you will learn more on the job than through education.
Hmm.
So I wanted to have some work experience, and after that, it just doesn't make sense to do an MBA in India. Plus, like I am not that competitive, in all honesty, to be able to crack and those exams and go to an IIM. And I really wanted to work, and I've always wanted to work and study with the best peers and best cohort of people around me. So when I knew that wasn't a possibility, I was like, okay, I'll just continue to grow within my job.
Hmm.
So that's what I did. I think a year and a half I was at Groupon, and then I wanted to do a little bit more, learn. That was more like brand and top of funnel awareness role for
Hmm.
Groupon, and then I wanted to do learn about something more on the business side. So that's when I got the opportunity at Uber. Again, Uber was almost like a lateral move for me. It wasn't like I moved into a senior role. It's only
Right.
after I joined, I literally joined at the bottom of the rung, and then I kind of progressed from there. And then I
Hmm.
moved to Uber, and I was like, okay, I will start to learn. And as and when after like 2 years of progressing, that's when I actually finally moved into like a manager role when I moved to the US. So
Right.
it started from the very basics, and I it was about learning a lot of different things during that period. And then as you start to get better at what you do, then you kind of are able to move up and get promoted and things like that.
Right. So you shifted to the US while you were still with Uber, right? So you shifted internally.
Yes.
So do employees generally get a chance to do that?
So a lot of the FANG companies, as you call it, which is your top tech companies, tech is
Yeah.
very they encouraging of internal mobility and internal movement. Typically, they will have teams within the organizations to facilitate that.
Mhm.
So Amazon, Facebook, Google, all of these companies, including Uber, have those internal policies to be able to move. So I did not have a plan to move to the US per se, but I wanted to move abroad. Now, either it was through education, you do an MBA, but then I just decided that I wanted to work for Longway at that point. So I decided to move internally within Uber, and it was like US was never the kind of option which I was going for, but just ended up being that way where the other places that I applied to did not work out. And then finally, which I thought was the US.
Right. So you were in the US for 9 months, and then you shifted to the UK,
Yes.
right? So how did that shift happen?
So that's an interesting shift. We're talking about 2019.
Yeah.
I got laid off by Uber because
Okay.
of internal reorg. They reorged the marketing organization, etc. And then they were giving me a role which I interviewed for internally, but it was not marketing. It was more operations and analyst kind of a role. And I didn't want to do that. I knew that I loved what I did, and I wanted to build my career in marketing. But obviously, because I moved with Uber, my ability to like work in the US was tied to my visa with Uber, and I cannot recruit within the US. So then I decided to kind of cast my net wider. I did not want to come back to India because I just moved abroad and I wanted to still gain a lot more of work experience, international work experience. So then I decided to recruit internationally in London, Singapore, all of these different places. And that's when I got an opportunity to move to London to work with Revolut. And I moved from the US and came to Revolut in the UK.
Right. So in Uber, like your last role was partner marketing manager, right? So it was still, very marketing-y. But now when you moved to Revolut, it was the product role of sorts. So
Yeah.
even though it's still product marketing, but it's still, product. So
Yeah.
usually what we've seen with students is that, companies tend to differentiate between people who have a BTech and they don't have, or those who don't have a BTech for anything that is related to product. So did you feel that you had any issues in that sense?
So I would say product marketing doesn't necessarily have a requirement that you need to be from a BTech or an engineering background, to be very honest, unless and until it depends on the industry, unless and until you're in a very technical, I don't know, cybersecurity, like very specific areas in industry where the product itself is so technical that you need to have a technical background to be able to kind of market it and speak about it. Those are like very, very niche industries. But outside of that, product marketing as an area and domain doesn't differentiate. Like you can have any background for all the care. It's just about the skills that you have to be a product marketer, which I do agree. So product marketing as compared to all the other types of marketing, it's one of the more, I would say, technical types of marketing, because it does require a lot more of your analytical skills. You need to be both creative and analytical because you need to do opportunity sizing and understand product development, etc., to be able to deliver in that role. So if you have good analytical skills along with your creative skills, you don't really require a background in engineering or BTech and things like that. So when I did move, so I was doing marketing in general at Uber, but the way that marketing is approached in tech companies and tech products, it's very, very I've frozen, I feel. Oh, yeah. It's very so it's very product centric. So you do have to learn. So I learned how to write SQL while I was at Uber. So you learn being more technical and data oriented when you work in tech. And then when I moved to Revolut, I was leveraging a lot of those skills that I had built at Uber on the analytical side. So while I did not know how to differentiate between a backend and a front end engineer when I moved into that role, I was building a lot on my analytical skills that I learned at Uber, just like cohorting, analysis. So all of that stuff came in really, really helpful moving into that role. But everything around the product lifecycle development, all of that, I had to learn from scratch, and I had the willingness to be able to learn. But that doesn't mean you can become, I know people who have become product managers without having an engineering background. That was literally my manager at Revolut. He studied at LSE and he was a product owner without having a technical background. So it's really about what you can learn rather than what you have kind of studied or had to have a degree in the past.
Right. So, once you were done, so at Revolut, you were there for a year, and then you made the move to Bumble, right?
Yes.
How did that happen?
So for that, so I was at Revolut. It was, again, I was moving from ride sharing to fintech. Fintech was a whole different industry for me to learn all of that. And I ended up doing a lot of different projects at Revolut. And then finally, I was also, being in tech, and this is something which is like you're kind of sick and tired. If you're a woman in tech, you're kind of sick and tired of just seeing men around all the time. And it was just when Bumble, the opportunity came, I was really surprised that there is a company and a culture which is focused on around kindness and women and empowerment of women, which was super, super exciting for me. So, and they were also building. So when I joined Revolut, by the way, Revolut, I was the first product marketing manager they were hiring. So there's also like, you can do all the skills and you can have all the skills, but luck plays a part, where they were trying to build and they were wanting to give somebody the opportunity to build product marketing from the ground up. And people who were hiring also did not necessarily fully understand what kind of role you will play. So when I went there, I actually wrote my own job description when I was at Revolut, like, okay, this is all I'm going to do. Similarly, when I got the opportunity to move to Bumble, they were they were trying to build product marketing from scratch again. They did not have a function. They had a very extensive marketing team, but product marketing was new for them. So then I came in here as well. Similar, had to build what exactly product marketing will do from the ground up. And then I kind of transitioned and moved from Revolut to Bumble. Again, it was a very different industry, social media, dating category, completely different, but I think the core is still the same. Your skills are very transferable when you're in product marketing, which is how do you uh, size the audience? How do you understand the positioning, messaging of the product? How do you build on that? And then finally, how do you deliver great launch campaigns within go-to-market strategy? So that all of that I could kind of bring. Now that I've learned the understanding of product development and everything at Revolut, I brought that to Bumble.
Right. So when ever since you were in Bumble, do you think that your career progressed at a very, rapid pace as compared to your peers? Because from what I can see, like again, I don't have a international perspective on the speed of career progression in the UK, but from in India, it doesn't happen this fast. So what do you think was happening there?
The pace of career progression is a very personal thing. And I don't necessarily think you can just pull out a yardstick and just compare with other people, because there's so much that goes on
Right.
with career progression, right? Like when I was in India and Uber, I was getting promoted. Like you would always think like, oh, somebody else is getting promoted faster, somebody else. But it's a very personal thing. And I think I've always been the person who has tried to have goals and milestones for myself rather than it being dictated by at what pace it's happening for other people. I think in being very transparent, the difference probably in India and having a career outside is I did think I did feel I was getting a bit plateaued in India because I did not have an MBA. And the pure reason for that is supply demand. It's as simple. In India, everyone has an MBA, and everyone who's doing well in their careers, typically most people will have an MBA. So when you are somebody who doesn't have an MBA, it's kind of a disadvantage because the status quo is that everyone else has it.
Yeah.
Whereas when you move abroad, the number of people who actually have an MBA is a lot lesser. So what happens is it might be a preference for them to have an MBA, but you don't have a disadvantage. You're at the playing field is still leveled because they might have a preference for an MBA, but you will not disqualify you for not having one.
Right.
And I think that differentiation is probably what I have experienced personally in India, where moving into senior manager roles, it gets a little bit more challenging if you don't have an MBA versus when you move abroad. It doesn't really define. Like if you are good at what you do, you can progress without necessarily that being a blocker in your career. So from a progression standpoint, I feel like it's very personal for me also. There are times where I'm like, I should have been promoted a year earlier, or I should have, all those things are in your head based on what do you think you're delivering. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's like fast or slow. I think it's fine. For me personally, at some point, being very honest, I didn't think it was fast enough. But then I think in the grand scheme of things, when you have a career which is 30 years, you're going to work for 30 years, 6 months here and there doesn't really make so much of a difference.
Right. So, again, we talked about how an MBA can be a roadblock, like in India, like everyone has one, so you also need to have one. And whereas you don't feel the same when, in the UK or in the US, right? So for someone who's looking to make a career in marketing, right, outside of India, do you think so? Generally, what options that students here are faced with are A, do an MBA here, or B, go abroad and do, a higher education degree there and then try to find a job. So, so between these two options, for someone who's looking to make a career abroad, what's your opinion on that? Like, if do an MBA from a tier one college in India, or try to find something abroad, if the eventual goal is to shift abroad.
Okay. So it's as simple. If the eventual goal is to move abroad, the MBA that you want to do should be in the geography that you want to work. And so it's not even like abroad as like a generic term. If you want to long-term live in the UK, do an MBA in the UK. If you want to live long-term and build a career in the US, do. And there are a couple of reasons because of that. MBA more than a degree is a network. And that network unlocks opportunities for you. So if you have done an MBA from a tier one in India, your network is going to be primarily in India versus if you do it in the UK. So that's one of the reasons. And there are some schools in the UK and like say INSEAD, although they have a very international network. So people make choices for what MBA they want to go for outside of like, I think in India, we're very obsessed with rankings, etc. But I think there's a larger, game at play here, which is where do you want to eventually land up and what do you want that MBA to unlock for you. So it's as simple. Do study where you want your network to be and where you want to unlock opportunities. So that's definitely one. Having said that, I don't think MBA or higher education is the only way to move abroad. Like I am the personal example of that. So I don't think people should be restricted in thinking that this is their only way of, finding a career outside of India. It is one of the easiest ways, yes, because it's simple. You get in the larger scheme of things, you get an admission and you move, and then you have eligibility. You have kind of one blocker of not being in the location is already kind of removed. But there are other ways, which is like if you work in if you're working in tech or if you're working in a large corporations, they do have internal mobility programs where you can move. Most of my friends who are in the UK or US, they've all moved through like internal mobility rather than MBA. So I'm kind of a little bit more biased towards that because it obviously dramatically reduces the cost and the financial implications for you. And then like you move somewhere while you're getting a paycheck. So it's a very different like move as compared to doing an MBA. I think MBA, you should not just look at doing an MBA for changing your geography. It should be looked at in general what it unlocks for you from a career perspective, be it like a network, be it you want to change your industry, things like that. I think that's a lot more, MBA is a lot more useful for that. And then there are other ways as well where you can move. If you have done really well, I know a lot of people, especially in product and tech, if you have worked in good, Indian companies and startups, you are able to kind of take those skills and, recruit directly in Europe or UK. I know people moving from Flipkart and Zomato and all these different companies. If you have done really well from a product, tech, software engineering, or even marketing for that matter, you are able to kind of recruit internationally. So those options do exist. Is it a little bit harder? Yes, it is harder because, again, your network is primarily India. It's harder to find networks internationally, but it's possible. So those options also exist outside of an MBA.
Right. So generally speaking, when it comes to mobility within the company in marketing, they tend to consider you as an expert of that particular geography, right?
Yes.
So isn't that a roadblock in, going abroad?
So that's where you have to be strategic, right? So I think I learned this while I was trying to recruit. So what type of marketing you do will also define how easy it is for you to move internationally.
Mm.
So if you are a brand marketer, 100%, or like somebody in events or something, it's going to be very difficult to move because you need to know what the culture of that region is, what makes people tick. All of those things are, and you need to have experience of, like I said, marketing is a very experience-led skill that you learn on the job. So they are going to look for your past experience in the region of working with those customers, knowing agencies and things like that.
Yeah.
So what part of marketing you do will also define. For example, performance marketing, which is primarily analytical and numbers and being able to understand data sets, etc. To be able to build performance marketing algorithms, etc. It's a lot easier to move internationally because more about how do your understanding of channels and efficiencies and budgets and things like that you can translate over actually the regional learnings. So what type of marketing do you want? So I knew very early on, I did brand marketing initially in my career, but I knew when I was moving with an Uber as well that brand marketing is going to be very hard for me to crack. And also the second barrier is language. So if you're looking at countries which are non-English speaking, it becomes further difficult because you don't understand the local language, which is really big part of the culture. So I knew brand marketing is going to be difficult to move into, but again, it's not impossible, but it is a lot harder, especially because a lot of these internal mobility, when you move, you actually have to interview, right? You have the same process as an external candidate. So even if you were eligible for that role, which I was at Uber, I could have interviewed for any of these marketing roles, you are competing against a local in most likelihood who has experience and past knowledge and all of that in that region. So just from a skill set standpoint, it'd be very difficult for you to be compete with somebody like that because obviously you've not grown up there, you don't know, and you don't understand the cultural nuances. So that way there are other parts of marketing which are not so connected to the local understanding, everything. And eventually, like today, if I want to, now I've worked for UK in the UK for 3 years, if I want to move into a brand role, I can 100% do that now because I have that experience and exposure of being here. But begin with, when you're moving, you have to when you're moving geographies, you want to keep your role the same because then the person can be like, okay, she's wanting to do the same role, it's just that she wants to do it in different geographies. So that becomes a lot easier rather than changing your career on multiple dimensions. And then there are other parts of marketing which I think are a lot easier to move in, which is like, let's say, product marketing or performance marketing, etc., which are a lot more analytical in that way. I would say analytical, not necessarily just analytical, but like not so dependent on local culture understanding.
All right. Apart from this, like apart from the whole, MBA dialogue and, corporate and everything else, what do you think was your biggest challenge when you moved abroad? And what do you think has been your biggest challenge overall in your corporate life so far?
Moving abroad, I think the culture shock is harder than you think it is. And I'll give you an example. It was really funny. When I moved to the US, I feel like moving to the UK was a lot easier than moving to the US. But think about it. I was working in Jaipur, which is like my hometown from like Uber. I was in Jaipur. I moved to New York City. And
Nice.
and you're like, when you are, let's say, well exposed or well educated, whatever, in India, you say, oh, we watch the same stuff, we have the whole understanding of pop culture, but so you just don't anticipate how stark the difference is when moving, and I had to like travel to the US and everything, but it's not the same when you actually start working there. So working with people from different cultures is
Mm.
a lot. It's something that you learn and you have to adapt, and like with different people, when you go there and you're like everyone's eating in 15 minutes on their desks rather than doing a 1 hour like sit down lunch when you're back at home. It's very different, and to be able to connect with people and build relationships is probably one of the most difficult things when you move internationally, because there is a cultural difference and you need to be able to navigate that, and it is different for somebody who's American, who's different for people in the UK. Well, currently my role is global. I work from people from across the world, and I have to change my style of communication and my style of building relationships based on where they are from, because it's not like it's you can't cast like one net and it works for everybody. It's similar like if you are in India, if there are people from different backgrounds, you want to like acknowledge that, and that helps you build relationships. So I think hands down, building relationships internationally was one of the challenges that I did face, and communicating with them in a way that they understand. Like when I went to the south of the US, it was a whole, and I had to pitch to like clients and partners that we have there. It was just, I was a nervous wreck because I was like, they're talking about sports and all of these things, which I had no clue about. Like, what do I do small talk on? And US is massive on small talk. They love their small talk. So I think those things were difficult. Even your competencies flip. So while I was in India, and that was really funny when I moved like end of the year. So my performance
Mm.
review was delivered by my new manager in the US, but it was like written down like it was from all the competencies was from the past year in India, and they both kind of collectively delivered. And my previous manager's like, well, she's like great at like communication, interpersonal skills, all of that, but she can really work as compared to her peers. She can really do well on her analytical skills. Like we push her further. And then my new manager's like, what are you talking about? She is an analytical guru. Like she can write SQL. Nobody in my team is able to do that. But when it comes to communication and all of that, she can probably be a little bit better. So it was just like complete flip of what I thought my competencies were when you just change the context and you change the environment. So I think those were some of the challenges. But yeah, learning to build relationships was difficult. And so that's first. And in my professional career, I think, what do you think was difficult when I moved abroad? I'm trying to think. I think it was just for me, what I did in India, just from a competency standpoint, was different from what I did when I moved internationally. I had to like learn about product marketing and all of these things. I also like to keep things interesting because I typically work in tech in general, right? So
Mm.
learn about new methods. Like I moved into like a new role, which is growth product marketing, which is very different, doing more of the growth stuff. I think those were some of the step challenges that I had to kind of overcome. But I don't necessarily feel it was anything to do with, I think just when you move abroad from India, I think the whole competitiveness just it changes the way that you think about competing, and the way you think about your career. It's no longer like just that linear progression.
Mm.
Yeah, if that is important to you, that will always be. I think that is important for a lot of people, but it's more than that. It's building, how do you build other muscles, how do you like things that like trying to speak on public forums, and all of these things that you never thought about while I was in there, you start to think about when you move abroad, because it's a lot more about your presence rather than just if you are good at your job. And I think that's one of the biggest learnings you have when you move abroad, that it's not just that you'll do your job really really well and
Mm.
that's going to get you to the success that you want. I think we're just pigeonholed and hold into that thinking. When you move abroad, you start to think it's a lot more at play. Your storytelling, your narrative, who's taking your name in what rooms, like all of those things become a lot more important, and especially as you get more senior in the organization.
Right. So earlier you mentioned that how y- you learned SQL, when you working at Uber, right? So
Hmm.
apart from that, what kind of things did you learn, or what kind of things do you think any aspiring marketer should learn behind the scenes? Even if it's not directly a part of their job, but something that would help them, in the future. Do you have any such things in mind?
When you say a marketer, it's such a broad term.
It's a very broad term. Yeah.
It really depends on what type of marketing you are doing. But I think, and also the industry that you're in. Like I can talk about like, oh, I read a lot of these, keep a pulse on like what's happening in tech, what new products are releasing and things like that. But that's not going to be relevant to somebody who's working as a brand manager in FMCG or something like that. So it's just like you have to stay abreast of what's happening in your industry, what's like new things, because marketers are often looked at people who will understand the competitive landscape, who will understand what's the next new thing, where are customers kind of moving, progressing. So whatever industry you're on, like trying to stay on top of that. I can like talk about like there are fundamentals of books and everything, but I just feel like marketing and in general technology, all of that is evolving so fast. You
Mhm.
have to make sure that you are current with the times. So a lot of the old books, etc., things like that, and like people tell me, oh, 4 P's of marketing and Philip Kotler, and I'm like, nobody, no marketer ever uses that. So I mean, that is foundational to your understanding of customers and marketing, but you don't go and refer to those books. So I feel like it it's a lot more dynamic. Learn about new products that are releasing. What is their strategy? A lot of your strategy or things that you will build will actually come through inspiration. They don't want to believe that, but it's not always like a pot of new ideas that's bubbling. You look at what people are doing in different industries and things like that, and then you see, okay, maybe there's something interesting there where I can translate that into my job and my role. So it's the good way to learn is actually seeing what's going out there and what people are doing out there. And I think lastly, which I feel is completely underestimated right now, and in like no people don't do that enough, is connect with people and learn from people. My entire career, I think the way that I've been able to learn is by working alongside really, really smart people, like, who championed and like supported my whole they wanted to like make me learn things which you will never always know things that you need to do in your job. So you need to be connected with people who know that, who can help you learn all of those things. And just being by in their presence, you will learn something new just by having an interaction or like a water cooler conversation, whatever that is. So it is, I feel, very underrated, but be around people who you think you can learn from and then connect with them, engage with them on a regular basis, because that way you will get to know a lot of things that are happening, and then you can use that in your job and to be able to stand out in your job. And you never know later in life how that relationship, if you really build that, how it can help you progress in your career or unlock a new opportunity for that matter.
All right. Well, I've taken up a lot of your time. Do you have any other tips for, aspirants who are, currently looking to make a career like yours?
Oh, don't make a career like mine. Make your own career, please. So that I will start. Like everyone has different paths and different journeys. So also everyone struggles with their career. It's not like it's unique. Like somebody is you might look in a linear progression, but you actually don't know how many internal decisions and how many crosses and paths and disappointments that have gone out there. So don't like it's great to be inspired by like, oh, where you would like to get to, but you'll have to chart your own journey.
Yeah.
And think about like even for me, like I took unconventional choices, which is like I did marketing, where I didn't do marketing and I didn't do an MBA in marketing, which was typically the case if you want to build a career in India. Then I moved abroad. Then I moved from one country to like once people move to the US, they don't really move anywhere else. And I was like, I moved to London. So you will make choices that seem right to you. Like the safe part there would be I would have taken the job that I was getting and I was like, okay, fine, I'll figure it out and I wouldn't have to leave the country. But then I moved to London because I knew that long term what I wanted to do. So have a long term North Star, because it makes your decision making really easy when you are faced with different choices, because you know what the eventual goal you want to get to. And then um don't be afraid to make choices that don't are not necessarily the most obvious, right? Like which everyone is doing them, it's the safest path. You can, if you make those it's the same, like high risk, but also gives you asymmetrical returns.
Mm.
So I'm not saying be extremely risky and like go quit your job and do whatever. Like you obviously have to make that choice what is right for you, but just don't make decisions based on what everyone else is doing or what the conventional wisdom around a certain path is. Try things out and have a long-term view with your career. Like it's not about a I remember like really getting upset for like a 3-month review that I had. And my manager was like, why are you fretting about something that, has not moved in 3 months? Like you're going to work at 30 years in your life. So it's more of a long-term play. That what's the, long-term goal that you want to get to. And
Mm.
there's no rush to get to there, is what I'm saying.
All right. All right then. Thank you for making time for this short video call. And
No,
I know a lot of people are gonna watch it and feel really inspired by your whole career trajectory and everything else, even if you don't want them to try to copy it. Um,
yeah, exactly. That's not what I want to say. I think I'm just saying it just should be the clarity that if I can take these non-conventional routes and get to where I or they think I am,
mm,
then they can do it too, and they don't have to fit in a mold. And I was never to fit in the mold, did not do engineering, did not like do the typical things that you are trained and conditioned to do in an Indian kind of context. So yeah, I definitely don't want them to like look at my journey and follow, because it's also been a lot of struggles, but find their own path essentially.
right. All right
All
then.
right.
All right. Thank you so much for showing up, and thanks for this meeting. It was really fun having you here.